So thyrogen is a protein that is designed to replace this hormone called TSH that is produced in human bodies by the thyroid gland, and it's used on people who have thyroid cancer. So those two images I have on the right there, one is a picture of Thyrogen in its bottle and then the box that it comes in, and then that bottom one is just a picture of Thyrogen compared to the hormone that it is replacing, and as you can see, both of them are identical in their structure. So Thyrogen has a couple main ingredients, but the most important one is the thyrotropin alpha. Then there's also mannitol, sodium phosphate, monobasic, monohydrate, sodium phosphate dibasic, and heptahydrate sodium chloride. Its original form is a powder, as you can see in that previous picture. In that bottle, there's just some powder in there. And that powder is mixed into a sterile water solution, which is then injected into a patient. So Thyrogen is given prior to radioactive iodine ablation or diagnostic testing, which are done in patients with well-differentiated thyroid cancer. And like I said, it's administered through injection, and the amount that's administered is 1 milliliter of the solution. Otherwise, it's just 0.9 milligrams of the powder. Thyrogen has two main functions, like I mentioned previously. One is the radioactive iodine ablation. This is just a process that's done to help patients prepare for treatment with a form of iodine, which removes leftover thyroid tissue in patients who've had surgery that took out their entire thyroid gland. So what these patients have gone through is they've been diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and they've had to have their entire thyroid removed before they can have treatment. And once they have it removed, there's oftentimes tissue that's left over. So they have to go through this process called radioactive iodine ablation. And Thyrogen helps in this process to take out that leftover tissue so that they can receive the treatment they need. The second function is in diagnostic testing. Diagnostic testing is done to help identify thyroid disease by testing the blood for hormones that are harmful. And these hormones are found in follow-up patients who have a certain type of thyroid cancer called differentiated thyroid cancer. And so basically, because of having thyroid cancer, these people have a very, very low level of the hormone I mentioned previously called TSH. And in order for this testing to be done accurately, these levels of TSH have to be really high. But because they're so low, the testing is inaccurate. So they take Thyrogen in order to replace those hormones and to make the testing more accurate. So the main advantage of taking Thyrogen is that it prevents complications. One of the biggest complications that you can have because of having thyroid cancer is this thing called hypothyroidism, and that's something that I want to go a little deeper into. So hypothyroidism is a complication that arises from having thyroid cancer. Some symptoms that you can experience are cold intolerance, dry, coarse skin, weight gain, poor appetite, fatigue, slow thinking. And before Thyrogen was invented, a lot of people who had thyroid cancer would experience hypothyroidism. And so Thyrogen has really revolutionized the way that people experience thyroid cancer, in that it helps to prevent this terrible complication that can arise from having it. So that's a really good thing that Thyrogen has done. And that picture there on the right is just a picture that I found with all the different symptoms that can be experienced as a result of having hypothyroidism. Genzyme is the company that produces Thyrogen. They're located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they were bought by another company in 2011 called, I think it's called Sanofi. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's how you pronounce it. So I got a little bit of information on Genzyme. In 2010, Genzyme entered into a consent decree of permanent injunction with the FDA because Genzyme was accused of manufacturing, labeling, and distributing drugs at its Massachusetts facility in violation of a current manufacturing requirement for drugs. And that actually resulted in a loss of $175 million. I kind of have to wonder whether or not them selling out to Sanofi, or Sanofi, the company that I previously mentioned, I wonder if that was a result of losing all this money. Maybe they just needed to sell out so that they wouldn't go bankrupt. But there really is no sign of Thyrogen having any kind of negative effect on patients as a result of this violation. So I got a little bit of information on thyroid cancer. So this picture here, this is just an image of the rate of new cancers in the United States. So as you can see, in the state of New York, there's about 468 to 509 people per 100,000 that have a new case of cancer each year. In our state of Minnesota, that number is a little less. You get about 449 to 465 per 100,000 people that have a new case of cancer. And then in the southwest corner, that's in the US, that's where new cases of cancer are the least common. And that number is 359 to 413 per 100,000 people. So thyroid cancer actually comes in at number 10 in the rate of new cancer cases, at about 14 cases per 100,000 people. You can see that in this image here, that bottom line. And so if you do the math, if you take 14 and you divide it by 465, which is the number of new cases per year in Minnesota of just cancer cases, you get about 3%. So that means of all the new cases of cancer in the entire state of Minnesota, usually around 3% of those cases are thyroid cancer. Also, thyroid cancer doesn't really even compare with other types of cancer like breast cancer or brain cancer in its mortality rate. And so what we can conclude from that is that thyroid cancer is just not as deadly as other cancers, and it's usually pretty treatable, and it's rare compared to other types of cancer. I kind of skipped over this previous image here. So this was just showing the number of deaths due to thyroid cancer in the United States from 1999 to 2016. And as you can see, there really isn't that many deaths compared to other kinds of cancers. So for marketing and sales and ethical issues related to Thyrogen, I really didn't find anything. And especially for the marketing part and the sales part, I think this is probably due to thyroid cancer being so rare as I've shown, and it just has a smaller market. And so I just don't think there's a lot out there on it right now. And I really couldn't find anything ethical wise pertaining to Thyrogen. I don't think that there's any questions as to whether or not this is a good drug. I think that it's having a good impact, a really positive impact on those who have thyroid cancer. And I think that it's making a really big difference in treating thyroid cancer and helping those people recover from it. So that's all I got. Thank you for watching my presentation, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your school year.